Hey guys, it's Dr. J here in the house. Evan, how are we doing, man?
Happy Monday to you. Life is good. The sky's blue. I can't complain.
Love it, man. Well, today we're going to chat about heavy metals and the gut connection. I think a lot of people they get myopically focused on heavy metals, and they're one of the first things people want to do is they want to do this crazy detox when patients first come into care. You have all these docs that want to do that. And again, I think there's a time and a place for heavy metal testing. There's a time and a place for heavy metal detox. One of the biggest things that we want to chat about today is healthy gut function actually helps detoxify heavy metals. Getting rid of parasites can also help decrease heavy metals. Also, bringing in healthy gut bacteria like the Lactobacillus rhamnosus species has been shown to actually decrease certain heavy metals as well. So gut function, again, good hepatobiliary function, meaning your liver and your gallbladder dumping bile. Bile helps break down fat. And again, bile is also going to have a whole bunch of potential toxins in it that may go out via the stool as well. So healthy gut function, healthy liver and bile function is really important for fat digestion as well as heavy metal reduction. So let's kind of just talk about heavy metals and how it connects to the gut.
Yeah. So the first thing is if you've got a leaky gut, that's a problem. So you've eventually got to fix leaky gut. And of course, as you mentioned, people are typically doing it in the wrong order. They want to go straight to a heavy metal detox as the first step of their protocol. But if you've got a leaky gut, we know that you've likely got a leaky brain. Now, I haven't looked too much into the brain. I don't even know how you would do this with a test. I guess it would have to be post-mortem. Like how could you even test heavy metals in the brain? Like we know that with a leaky brain, that's possible, but how would you even test that to prove what we're saying? I feel like it'd be hard. It's like, what do? You cut a piece of the brain out and test it for metals? Like, how would you even do that?
Well, regarding the heavy metals, I mean, it'd be hard. You'd have to do tissue burden tests. So like you'd have to use like a chelation agent, like a DMPS or a DMSA. I like DMPS because they've shown that can kind of like scrape the surface of the blood-brain barrier. Dr. Rashid Buttar talks about like, if here's your blood-brain barrier and there's some metals right on the periphery, the DMPS just kind of comes by and just sloughs off that surface heavy metal amount that's hanging out there. So that's kind of the benefit that you get from the DMPS. It just kind of comes by the surface and just kind of scrapes off what's hanging out there versus going in there and, throwing a rock in the beehives, right? That's the big issue with metals is I know a chiropractor colleague of mine that did a heavy metal chelation off the bat. He did like an IV thing. And he did just kind of went into that first, and he literally got paralyzed from it. He had parts of his body that were paralyzed, and almost like with the hand hyperflexion like that, right? That kind of thing, like a stroke. And he still has it to this day from doing an excessive amount of heavy metal liberation off the bat. And Dr. Karazian's talked about, when he first got into functional medicine, doing some IV heavy metal chelations, people getting incredibly sick. So I really want to put our focus. The patients that are listening to this and like, oh, I'm myopically focused on heavy metals. Think about as we get the gut better, as we get digestion better, we're actually getting heavy metals reduced.
Yeah. So like, let's talk about, you mentioned the bile already, but let's go back to that for a second. We know that when we get your stool test back, if we look at your elevated fecal fat, the steatocrit marker, we can know, okay, you're not digesting fats well. You're probably not making enough bile. If you've got a sluggish liver, sluggish gallbladder function, to me, that seems like one of the pinch points, if you will, of the metals. Could you speak on that a bit, like the gallbladder and the metal connection?
Yeah, a lot of the metals are dumped out via the hepatobiliary system, right? And this is kind of like the big issue with a lot of people and potential like vaccination issues. Like there's some aluminum in a lot of the vaccines now, and a lot of people are concerned because in that first year or two of life, that hepatobiliary function isn't quite dialed in yet. So if you're getting exposed to some metals, it may be we don't quite have the mechanisms to get rid of those metals, right? So that's some of the people on the aluminum side. There's still a little bit of thimerosal in the flu vaccine still, which is a ethyl mercury compound. So having healthy hepatobiliary function, meaning hepato means liver, biliary means bile and bile ducts. So you have liver, and then the kind of like you have the bile production that happens in the liver, and then it goes down to the gallbladder, and the gallbladder holds it and concentrates it. And then when you have fat in your diet, that produces a hormone called CCK, cholecystokinin, which then causes the gallbladder to contract. and it produces bile salts, which then help emulsify and break down the fat. So imagine like a big fatty, like, let's say you cooked some bacon in a pan, right? And you feel that the bacon coating after it's kind of dried, so to speak. Well, that's like, it's just like stuck there, right? Imagine you get some nice Dawn soap and you break it up. It emulsifies, it breaks down that fatty coating. And that's kind of what bile salts do. It's like that Dawn dish soap. It breaks it down so your body can absorb a lot of those fat soluble nutrients, vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin K, the EPA fats in fish oil, the DHA fats in fish oil, the healthy saturated fats as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So what's happening with a low-fat diet then? If you're not getting that gallbladder to fire and therefore secrete bile, to me, it sounds like you've got a problem on your hands.
So not having enough fat in your diet is like not changing the oil in your car, right? Everyone has the experience. If you've gone too long without changing the oil, what happens? It starts getting sludgy, right? And you don't have that lubricant there for your engine, but it starts getting sludgy. And in our gallbladder analogy, it starts actually crystallizing and forming stones. And that's part of the reason why people can have gallbladder stone issues, gallstone issues, is because these stones crystallize because they're not moving. So it's like a river. It's like a fast flowing river when it gets cold. If the river is not moving, it can freeze, right? If it's moving really well, it's hard for a moving river to at least freeze, especially when it gets colder. It may still freeze, but it's going to be harder for it to freeze. So think of the bile that's moving. It's just not going to form and crystallize and get these stones going because it's got too much inertia behind it.
And then maybe we could chat about stress a bit. I mean, heavy metals are definitely a stress, but what about adrenals and emotional stress? And let's say you're eating too fast or you're not chewing food well. I want to try to outline a few different things that would affect gallbladder function. Let's say you are eating a whole foods diet, you're getting good fats in, you could still have gallbladder problems. Just because you eat high fat or higher fat doesn't mean that it's not possible for you to still have gallbladder issues and therefore fat digestion problems.
So can you repeat your question?
The question is, what are all the factors that would affect gallbladder function or suppress gallbladder function, even if you had fat in the diet? So you heard that part about low fat being bad. You're like, okay, well, I eat a lot of fat. So what other things could affect the gallbladder?
Well, number one, toxins can be more fat soluble. So we want to choose healthy fat soluble sources or, healthy, fats, right? Not with a whole bunch of pesticides and chemicals. They tend to be a more magnet for chemicals, right? Toxins. So metals are a toxin as well. So if we are, having metals, right, they're going to be in the bile, they're going to be in the fat, and ideally the body is going to sequester those and pull those out. If we have additional metals, we can give binders like charcoal or clays or modified citrus pectin or chlorella, which kind of help bind those things up and help us kind of escort it out of the body better. Now, when we have excess adrenal stress, that activates the sympathetic fight or flight nervous system. And when the fight or flight nervous system is activated, it's going to make it harder for us to increase stomach acid levels. With decreased stomach acid levels, it's also going to decrease enzyme levels. So when we have lower stomach acid, we need high stomach acid to activate our cholecystokinin, that's CCK. And then CCK is what stimulates the gallbladder from emptying. So if we have good stomach acid levels, high stomach acid levels, we're going to have good enzyme levels. We're going to be able to break down the fats better. We're going to be able to then increase the CCK, and then that's going to stimulate the gallbladder, which will empty. And that's going to have potential toxins in the bile as well. So that bile is going to potentially have the ability to break down fat, but there also will be some toxins that will be dumped out. So we have to have healthy stress levels, because if we have really slow motility, we could potentially reabsorb a lot of those toxins that's in our bile. So that's why we want good motility. Low thyroid function can create low motility. SIBO and dysbiosis and infections can create low motility. They can also create fast motility, which again, the problem with that is then we create a malabsorption environment. And then we talked about stress and the adrenals and that sympathetic nervous system, decreasing stomach acid, decreasing enzymes, decreasing CCK, which then decreases bile flow. Decreased bile flow is going to prevent those metals being removed via hepatobiliary, liver to gallbladder, gallbladder back into the intestines, and intestines into the stool, and stool into the toilet.
Yep, well said. So the whole cascade can really just fall apart at the top of the food chain as usual with digestion. So if you're eating while you're stressed out, you're not chewing your food, you're rushing through a meal, maybe you're playing on your phone or reading a newspaper while you're eating, just anything that's generally taking you away from the present moment, which is the parasympathetic process of digestion. If you're in sympathetic, you will not digest. So you've got to chill out, you've got to relax. I tell people if you've got 5 minutes before and after a meal just to breathe and just relax, even my wife, I'll get on her sometimes. She'll be eating the last bite of food and then she's scraping the plate into the garbage. It's like, no, slow down, sit at the table for a few minutes, chill out. Because if you can start that first cascade of, okay, I have food in my belly, you're in a good place. Now, you brought up infection, so let's go a little deeper there. We've chatted about H. pylori tons of times, but I think it's worth mentioning here with heavy metals because if you have H. pylori, that bacterial infection is going to shut down HCl. So if you're low on hydrochloric acid, now the gallbladder is basically not going to get this message to secrete, and therefore you're not going to have the ability to push metals out. The fecal fat's going to go up, and it could all happen just from H. pylori alone.
100%. I have one study here. I want to just kind of read the abstract here a little bit. So off the bat, they talked about the gastrointestinal epithelium having several functions. Number one being a physical barrier, ensuring mucosal immune response and excluding or detoxifying harmful intestinal content. So healthy gut bacteria has a major effect on detoxifying healthy content. So heavy metals can also disrupt the gut microbiota, but low and poor microbiota, poor healthy gut bacteria can also have an effect on detoxification. So this is why eating really good foods that don't contain xenobiotics or foreign antibiotic sources, meat that's not, conventional. So we're not getting exposure to antibiotics, just not getting exposure to antibiotics in our overall life in general will have a big help on that. Not eating excess sugar. All of these things can affect our microbiome. Having infections, like you mentioned earlier, Evan, with the H. pylori can also affect the microbiome. And then with poor microbiota balance, that can potentially affect our body's ability to rid itself of these toxins.
Yep. So let's go into some of the binder conversation a bit. You hit on clay. You hit on, what was the other one you mentioned?
Did you activated charcoal was good. Yeah. Modified citrus pectin is really good. Chlorella, different types of chlorella is excellent to bind up mercury in the gut. Chlorella is not great at pulling out mercury in the body, but it's really good by pulling it out in the gut.
Okay.
The modified citrus pectin is really great because that's been shown to reduce lead. They've done studies in retirement homes where they've seen that significantly reduce lead. And I like that because it's not like a liberator. It's not like maybe a chelation compound that may liberate and throw a rock in the beehive, so to speak. It's more just cleaning up what's hanging out. So It's a little bit different than like a DMSA or a DMPS, those kind of compounds.
Let's chat about herbs a bit too. I mean, we use a lot of things that can help support the liver.
Cilantro is great, right?
What about like burdock? We've got milk thistle. We've got vitamin A we use a lot. Beetroot powder is good. Goldenrod can be good too.
Those are all really good for bile flow. Like a lot of those herbs, they're very tonifying and supporting to oxidative stress in the liver, like milk thistle or silymarin. Like the burdock or the dandelion root or the fringe tree root, fringe tree extract. These are really good for liver and gallbladder flow. So they allow things to flow better flow. Things go out into the intestines where they should go. And that's going to then help with fat breakdown. It's also going to help with toxin elimination. And again, we can also increase the fiber, right? Which is basically what modified citrus pectin is, because that fiber will prevent the bile from being recycled. And why is that helpful? Well, if the bile has maybe more heavy metals in it, it may not be the kind of bile that we want to recycle. We may want to get rid of it. So like I mentioned, when you dump out the bile, it's going to serve for fatty acid digestion, but it's also may have some toxins in it as well. So our body likes to recycle a lot of that bile. That's why like the cholestyramines, which are like the older statin, they're not really a statin, but they're cholesterol lowering drugs. And they were basically bile sequestering agents, bile salt sequestering. That means it would bind to the bile and pull it out. Now, guys like Richie Shoemaker are doing that as a way to eliminate mycotoxins, because they say a lot of mycotoxins are in the bile as well. So they're trying to remove the mycotoxins in mold by giving bile salt sequestering agents. We can do it with different fibers as well. And that prevents that bile from being reabsorbed. But again, bile is primarily cholesterol. What's cholesterol, guys? Cholesterol is a building block for a lot of your hormones. If you look at the hormonal cascade. We have cholesterol, we have pregnenolone, and then pregnenolone shoots out into progesterone, shoots out into estrogen, shoots out into mineral corticoids like aldosterone that help with mineral regulation. And then we have cortisol and the stress hormones on the other side. So cholesterol is really important. It's not that it's bad and we want to get rid of it. It's that it also can have be a magnet in the form of bile salts towards metals. And if we have metal issues, we may want to use some kind of a natural fiber to knock it out.
So if cholesterol is too low, like with a statin medication, or if cholesterol is, let's say, in the 400s, I guess, is there an issue being too high or too low?
Well, definitely can be. I mean, it can be. So if cholesterol is too high, it can mean there's low thyroid function potentially. Cholesterol is like a Band-Aid. So think about it as if you walk into a thorn bush, are you going to need more Band-Aids that day or less Band-Aids, right? Yeah. A lot more because of the inflammation from the thorn. So cholesterol could be laying down more internal Band-Aids in the arteries and the area that's inflamed because of stress and inflammation. So that's also possible too. There could be hypercholesterolemia. Again, this is going to be something that will be chronic throughout your whole life because the enzyme that stimulates cholesterol, the HMG-CoA reductase enzyme, is overactive. So that's going to stimulate more cholesterol production. And then also regarding, cholesterol, I think some of the research in I think it was the Framingham Heart Study showed like 320 or higher is where the risk factor of cholesterol could be bad for your heart, right? That's where it can kind of increase to that 320 point. We like to look at the ratio between HDL and total cholesterol. We like it, below 4.5 to 4. That's a pretty good way to look at it. So if your HDL is around 80 or 90 and you're, let's say 4 times 90 is 360, 360 may not be bad for cholesterol if your HDL is within that 4 to 4.5 level. I may be okay with that, but we have to look at the thyroid. We have to look at the systemic inflammation. We have to kind of take the whole entire body in perspective of what's happening.
Yeah, because you can't just take somebody and say everyone has to be below 200 with total cholesterol. This doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and again, the reason why doing bile salt sequestering compounds, whether it's natural stuff like citrus pectins or whether it's cholestyramine, the reason why it's not as bad as a statin is because, number one, a statin is blocking the enzyme that makes cholesterol. The problem is that enzyme is also active for the mevalonic acid pathway, that same pathway that makes internal CoQ10. So the problem with a statin is you're blocking the enzyme that also makes CoQ10, and CoQ10 is really important for your mitochondria and your Krebs cycle and generating ATP and energy. And that's a problem because if you look at antibiotics and a lot of the pharmaceutical drugs, just type in any drug or any antibiotic and type in the word mitochondrial dysfunction, that these medications have some negative effects on the mitochondria. So if you're doing that, you're taking a statin, which automatically lowers the building blocks that run that mitochondria, CoQ10, ubiquinone, right? That's going to affect everything. That's going to make your mitochondria really sluggish and maybe decrease your ability to generate energy, maybe increase your chance for chronic fatigue and other adrenal and thyroid issues. And CoQ10 is also really important for autoimmune thyroid. It really helps with thyroid inflammation. So you're really more prone to other inflammatory conditions because those anti-inflammatory nutrients aren't there. Plus, if you're decreasing your cholesterol levels artificially with a statin, you're also going to have less building blocks for your hormones. And then cholesterol levels below, let's see here, it's on my dry erase board. Cholesterol levels below 160 increases your chance of psychotic illness, Alzheimer's, dementia. Yep. You'll see a video about that later on today. So low cholesterol, and that's actually NIH study right there.
I've seen that with depression too. There's other literature out there about depression with cholesterol being too low too. So
exactly, 100%. No doubt, man.
That's a trip. Well said about that. Regarding the end stage for people with heavy metals, the timeline is key here. So remember, this is a marathon. This is a long-term thing. I don't think heavy metals are something where you could just come in, do a couple months or maybe even 3-6 months, and then just say, I'm done with metals, because it just doesn't work like that. The environment is just too toxic with metals. So this is really something that, I don't know how you want to frame it, Justin, but to me, it's something that should be daily.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a long-term thing. I think the big exposure for heavy metals for most people is going to be mercury fillings. Most people call them silver fillings, but they're greater than 50% mercury. So, we call them what they are. They're mercury amalgam fillings. Some people talk about fish being a big source of mercury. I think it depends. A natural chelator of mercury is selenium. And selenium, if you eat fish that are higher in selenium in relationship to mercury, you're automatically going to have more of a chelator that will help with the reduction of mercury. So like skipjack tuna is really high in selenium to mercury, wild Alaskan sockeye salmon, cod, haddock. So on my site, we'll put it up there, a good selenium to mercury ratio type of fish. So you can see where the mercury is much higher than selenium. And again, if you want to consume some of these fish and you're a little bit, on the edge about it, and you'll say you're pregnant or you just want to be careful, you can always take a little bit of chlorella with some fish or some activated charcoal. I'm okay with that too. But just know that selenium is going to be a natural chelator for it. And also, selenium is really important for thyroid inflammation and thyroid conversion. It's a building block for glutathione. It's a cofactor with glutathione production. And it's also going to be the enzyme, the 5-deiodinase enzyme that activates T4 to T3, your inactive to active thyroid hormone, will come from selenium as well.
Yeah, you got to have at least 200 mics, and then sometimes with autoimmunity, we may even bump it up closer to like a 400 microgram daily of selenium.
Yeah, 400 microgram may be a really good spot supplementally. Anywhere between 400 supplementally to maybe an additional 400 in your diet as well.
And what do you do for fish? How often? What are you doing for fish?
I do 1 to 2 times a week at least. I do skipjack tuna a lot of times. That's got a very high selenium to mercury ratio. I also consume it with maybe some extra really good fats and a lot of good vegetables along with it. If I go out and do sushi, I will typically bring some activated charcoal along with me just to be on the safe side.
I wonder, with the charcoal, it's like if you're eating that around the mealtime, are you sabotaging yourself in terms of absorbing other nutrients from that meal?
I don't think 100%. Definitely less, but you kind of have to factor in, if you're more worried about some of the potential toxins that are in there, then I would always err on the side of taking some activated charcoal. It's not going to soak everything up, but
right. It's like you got to choose your battles.
Yeah. It's an adsorbent compound. So it's like a magnet. So it doesn't just like bind to stuff like indiscriminately. It has a magnetic like attraction to pull these toxins in.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. It's an adsorbent, not an absorbent, right? Absorb is like, think of a sponge absorbing a whole bunch of fluid on a countertop. And adsorbent is like, remember back in like grade school, you see the thing with the iron filings, and then you put a magnet over it and all the iron filings jump towards the magnet. It's kind of like that.
Yeah, well said. That's cool. That makes a lot more sense to visualize it. Mm-hmm. Let's look at some of these questions, see if any of these are pertinent to the equation here.
Let's do it.
We had one from Tessa. She said, if you have low iron, does this indicate possible heavy metal toxicity?
If you have low iron, hard to say. I would look at it as, are you a vegan, vegetarian? If you're a female, are you having excessive menstruation? I would look at those first, number one. Number two, there could be malabsorption in the gut. So I would look at that first. I wouldn't jump to the heavy metals with low iron levels.
Yeah, I would say look at infections too, because Justin and I are seeing a lot of parasites. Also, we're seeing worms, and a lot of these worms, like hookworm, they can also cause anemia and steal your iron. So definitely get a stool test run. Look for all these big bugs and see if you can find it.
100%.
Here's one from Addie. She experiences chronic fatigue intermittently. She has a doctor's visit tomorrow. What kind of labs should she ask for? Addie, if you're going to a conventional doctor, even if you've requested a lab, which I would recommend, and Justin will probably say the same, is an organic acids test. So you can look into mitochondrial function as well as liver detox function, glutathione, amino acids. Conventional doc's not going to have a clue what you're talking about. You could try, but that's what I would look at if I were looking at chronic fatigue. And then also you could try getting a salivary adrenal test run, because if you have cortisol that's too high or cortisol that's too low, if you're not in the Goldilocks zone, you could be chronically fatigued that way. I know I was when I had adrenal problems. So I would say those two tests. Justin, what do you say?
Yeah. So you said the adrenals, right? And you said thyroid?
I said the oat.
So
adrenals.
Oat and adrenal, yeah, I would add probably thyroid to that as well, because you get all three factors of the energy system, right? You have the mitochondrial nutrients, which will be picked up in the oat. You have the adrenal, which will affect the cortisol. Cortisol is a glucocorticosteroid, gluco meaning blood sugar and energy, and then thyroid is going to be your metabolic thermostat. So those are the big three. But just know, like, your conventional, if you're trying to get functional medicine care in a conventional medical model, all right, it's like jamming a square peg in a circle hole. It's just not going to work. They're going to run TSH. They're going to look at you about mitochondria and be like, yeah, I don't know what you're talking about there. And then cortisol wise, they'll say, well, I don't think you have Cushing's or Addison's because you don't have any of the symptoms. And then they may say, okay, let's run an ACTH stim test. Maybe let's run a cortisol serum if they placate you, right? But that's not going to give you the data you need, because a lot of what we're talking about are functional imbalances, not pathological diseases.
Agreed. Yeah, well said. I would say her only shot, or her best shot, would be using the conventional doctor to get the blood work done. But you've really got to pound them that you want more than the TSH. You would want to make sure that you get also the free T3, the free T4, the reverse T3 if you can, the TPO antibody, which is your thyroid pyridoxase antibody, and then your TG, which is your thyroglobulin antibodies. I'd also get vitamin D, get your B12 levels checked. That would be great too. Maybe red blood cell magnesium. That's what you could use the conventional doc for. If you're lucky, they'll run those extra markers. But if they just do TSH, you're wasting your time. So make sure, triple make sure they do the antibodies for you, TPO and TG.
Love it. 100% makes sense. What do you think next for questions here, Evan?
Let's see here. Most of these are off topic, so I don't want to divert us too bad.
Yeah, if you guys are asking questions, we'd love the questions. Try to keep it as much on topic as possible. And again, if you're liking the show, give us a thumbs up, give us a share. We love the exposure. We want to help more people. That's our mission. And again, the more exposure we get, the more we can help more people. Plus, we want to answer your questions as well.
Yep. Here's one. So Tessa asked here, how do you increase your stomach acid, take digestive enzymes, just eat certain foods, or both? First, you got to figure out if your stomach acid's low, why would your stomach acid be low? And we hit on H. pylori being a big cause of low stomach acid. Also, eating while you're stressed, eating in a rush, not chewing your food, just any lifestyle stressors that could impact stomach acid levels. What else would you add, Justin?
Yeah, so she's got the cart before the horse. It's the HCl causes the low enzyme levels for the most part, because HCl is a trigger for activating pepsinogen to pepsin. That's an enzyme. And it's also the trigger for activating a lot of enzyme release from the pancreas. So we need to increase acidity. So the first thing you can do is work on the stress. Like you mentioned, chewing your food up helps increase the surface area. And then if you want, you could add in some digestive stimulators, like a little bit of lemon juice or a little bit of apple cider vinegar right before your meal. And you can even work your way up to some supplemental HCl. In my line, we use HCl Supreme. And we may also add in some supplemental enzymes. And we do them separately with people that have a lot of digestive issues because of atrophic gastritis, meaning their gut lining so thin, they may be only able to handle a small amount of HCl, but a larger amount of enzymes. And if we give HCl and enzymes together, we have to increase it in that ratio, versus we can stop where the HCl starts to irritate and go back a little bit, and then we can continue to up the enzymes accordingly. So that's why we do it that way. But of course, we're always focused on root cause first: stress, chewing, not hydrating with food, getting rid of the H. pylori, getting rid of the dysbiosis, but then using the supplements to help support your gut, kind of like you would be on crutches if you broke your ankle. It's kind of the same philosophy.
Yep, well said. And we're going a little bit more conservative with our dose of HCl. So if you look at something like a Now Food super enzyme, they're going to have a bunch of enzymes, but they've got like 700 or 800 milligram nearly of betaine hydrochloric acid. That could be too much for a lot of our clients, because if they have gut bugs or other infections that's irritating, creating that gastritis you mentioned, that's too much. So if you look at our formulas, we go a bit more conservative. Like 200 milligram would be a starting place. 200 milligram betaine, you may want to start there, just because if you've got issues, you may throw 600, 700, 800 in, and you might do more harm than good, and we don't want that.
Again, the people that are more sensitive, they're going to know. And if you don't know, just start with a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. If you do okay there, then you could probably start a little bit higher and work your way up.
Diluted, or you're saying diluted with a little bit of water? Or
I think you could just shoot it down straight.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I just rather shoot it down straight and get it done with, because it's so terrible.
Yeah.
You could always do a shot of lemon juice as well, because that gets the digestive support.
Now, are you saying just for the test, or just regularly you would do a shot of ACV? I don't know if that would affect the teeth or not, if it's touching your teeth.
I'd be okay with it. It's not bathing in it, right? It's like the acid that in your mouth that sits around your teeth primarily is from sugar, right? The staph mutant bacteria in the mouth eats a lot of the sugar and carbohydrate, and then spits off all these acids. So it's more the sugar consumption that creates the acid via the gut, via the bacteria in the mouth.
True. That's true. Well said.
I would think maybe that ACV may even kill some of that bacteria as well. Acetic acid, a lot of this critters don't like acids like that.
Yep. I think there's one more question here that was on topic. kind of on topic from Neem here. He asked, how do you go about reintroducing foods after Candida, SIBO, or other infections?
One at a time, one food at a time, every 3 to 4 days, lower dose, and then increment it up. Any negative symptoms, pull that food out.
How do you approach it? I know there's certain people that say, oh, there's a AIP reintroduction. You've got to start with like egg yolk and then egg white and then nuts. Have you seen a big difference in the order of operations, or is it really just whatever food?
I do. I have an autoimmune handout, autoimmune reintroduction diet handout on my blog post. Take a look at that. We'll try to have it posted in the show notes. But I try to always start with like egg yolks over the egg, because some people can handle the egg yolk, but not the egg and the egg whites, right? I always like soft poached, like so the yolk is runny versus fully cooked because of the oxidation and the rancidification of the cooking process. So soft yolks before going to a solid yolk, and then egg whites, whole eggs, seconds, right? And then next would be ghee before butter, and then one nut at a time, one seed at a time, one nightshade at a time. And that's kind of a good general order to do it, because some people can handle the egg yolk soft and not cooked, or they just can't handle the egg white at all. Some can handle ghee, but they can't handle the butter. So there's an incremental way in why we do it.
And then other foods, I mean, people freak out a lot about fruit and Candida. I haven't seen a big issue with berries. If you're doing organic berries,
a serving of 2 a day is fine. I'm not worried about that.
There's people who are like, oh my God, you have to do this Candida diet. If you eat one piece of fruit, you're going to feed the Candida and your protocol is not going to work. It's just not true.
We may even up the carbohydrates during killing to act like cheese on a mousetrap to bait them out.
Ah, that's interesting. So timing, I mean, we always like talk about carbs with dinner, like maybe a sweet potato.
I think carbs with dinner is better. I mean, the way I look at it is I want to stack the fasting period from sleep. I want to stack that period with keeping the carbs super low the first 2 meals of the day, because then I can take 8 or 10 hours without eating and then do another 6 to 8 hours without having really any carbs, maybe outside of veggies. So I can stack that ketogenic time frame of getting 16 hours in without really much carbohydrate. I like that stacking period.
Well, your brain works better too. So another benefit.
You can up the carbohydrates, post-workout, or you can even do it at night before you go to bed, or around dinner time is fine. And you can add in a serving or two of fruit. You can add in a serving of, healthy, safe starch, grain-free versions. That's all great.
Awesome. Well, I think that was all the questions. So if you want to wrap it up, we sure can.
Yeah, I think it's great. Someone asked about lymphatic support. Red root or red clover is great. Ginger's also great. Rebounding or whole body vibrations, also phenomenal. There's some really good lymphatic support, homeopathic, by a company called Heal. Heal is some really good lymphatic detox support. Those are great. I like that all significantly. Well, guys, give us a like, give us a thumbs up, hit the bell as well. That will actually tell you when we're going live. We're trying to go live on Fridays and Monday mornings here. I may go live once during the week because I'm getting so stoked with all these people listening and watching and great questions. So hit that bell, give me a thumbs up, give me a share right now. We want to help people. Anyone in your life that's having health issues, have them tune on board. We'll get their questions answered. And Evan, what a great show today, man. You have a phenomenal day, brother.
A lot of fun. You too. If you guys need to reach out, schedule a call, look up Justin's site. It's justinhealth.com. You can schedule a consult there. Also, you'll check out other things too that aren't here on the video. So there's other articles and things. There's full transcriptions. You don't mention that, but I think it's worth if people if people need to go back and read some of this, that's on Justin's site. So go view that. And then if you want to reach out, schedule a consult with me, you could do the same thing at my site, evanbrand.com. So we look forward to helping you out.
Evan, hey man, you have a phenomenal day. You take care.
You too. See ya.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.